Hey, welcome into Husker247 Daily. We've got 10 minutes at 10 a.m. for you today, and we're going to start with some news that came out of Tuesday. Nebraska has its kicker, Michael Bruntz, who will be handling the kicking role for Nebraska, at least on extra points and field goals. We'll see what happens with the kickoff situation, but the Huskers have settled on one kicker after a three-way battle this fall camp.
Yeah, Kyle Cunanan gets the first swing out of the gates. Cal transfer, Charlotte transfer. I think when we saw him kick in the open scrimmage or open practice, it felt like he was probably gonna have a strong chance to be the guy. Ball just kind of came off of his foot a little bit differently in the kicks that we saw. Um, Sounds like Alvano and Hole are continuing to battle for who's going to handle kickoffs. Like you said, TBD. Interestingly enough, Cunanan is also going to be the backup punter behind Archie Wilson for this game as well. If you're really getting deep on the depth chart to have in front of you during the game, but it's going to be Cunanan. Big leg. He was pretty consistent when he was at Charlotte, I think, for the most part. I think he played 13 or 14 games there. So that's kind of the last little bow, I guess, aside from the tackle spot about who's going to be starting and handling certain duties. But obviously, he was brought in by Mike Eckler this summer as kind of a targeted transfer. So not a huge surprise there. And especially given Alvano and Hole kind of still working their way back from injuries over the last couple of years.
Yeah, he was a targeted addition for Nebraska here. I think the sort of interesting thing is does not have a made field goal in the 50 plus range, and the two guys he beat out have each set some kind of school record. I think one for freshman for longest field goal in Alvano, and then I believe John Hole's kick at Ohio State was the longest made field goal on the road by a Nebraska kicker. There might be another caveat in it, like conference play or something like that too. But it goes to show you that Nebraska values what Kyle Cunanan had shown since he's arrived, and he's a guy that I thought he was a really interesting conversation earlier this fall camp. I mean, he hit on a bunch of things, the mental side, working with Brett Maher, and I think most importantly, not letting the tassels and sort of what things look like in the stadium affect your kicks. And so I think he's a kind of a veteran guy. It sounds weird to say because it's not like he's played a ton of football, but relative to the other two, he sort of has more of a veteran feel to him. And there's a confidence there. And so I'm excited to see what that looks like on Thursday as well. No real big surprise, though. With Tristan Alvano, I do think there's going to be some value there if he's your kickoff specialist. I think he has that big leg. You can rack up a bunch of touchbacks and force teams to start at the 25. That's always good, for a football program.
Yeah, it'll be interesting in the opener, going back to kind of what Matt Rule said multiple times during fall camp, and I think Mike Eckler kind of talked about this too, but they were still trying to get a sense of kind of what their range was on where they felt good about being able to attempt a field goal, kind of to your point that, is Nebraska good on 50? We'll see. I think the last time Matt Rule talked, he said basically they felt good to about 47 yards that they were able to get some work done there. We'll see, if that changes or if that's changed since he last talked once they actually get onto the field on Thursday. But yeah, I think there's value in also having a kicker that can just handle the kickoff piece of it, because that was something that Brian Buschini kind of had to jump in and do last year at times as well. And, again, with a new coordinator, is the approach going to be different? They've gone to rugby style punting, which is a big change. Nebraska seemed to want to invite kick returns last year as kind of a strategy. We'll see if they continue to do that or if they're just going to bang it through the end zone and bring it out to the 25. But yeah, that kind of different thinking on that part of the game is going to be kind of something to watch on Thursday.
Something else to watch for on Thursday. We know the depth chart is out. We also know there's some guys at Nebraska are going to find a way to get into the game that maybe isn't on the first string or even the second string in the depth chart. Bruntz, who's a guy that you're going to be keeping an eye out for that could pop up on Thursday, whether it be on the offense or the defensive side of the ball? We know lots of guys are going to get special teams opportunity, but let's kind of focus this to either offense or defense here.
Yeah, I think Quinn Clark's an interesting case. Dana Holgorsen kind of said this week that they have their core group of wide receivers, and then it's the guys in that second group that they're wanting to see how ready they are and whether they can kind of turn it on when the lights are on. And Quinn Clark's in that group. Keelan Smith is in that group. I think Cortez Mills is kind of in that group as well. I think the top flight guys, Barney, Key, Hunter, are going to be ready to go on Thursday. But the strength of that group is really whether the redshirt freshmen and true freshmen can get in the mix and provide a little bit for the offense. And Quinn Clark's a guy that I wrote about last week, I think, but has really kind of reshaped his body. He's a legit 6'5", just a really freak athlete, high jump 6'8" in high school. But a guy that I think benefited a lot from a redshirt year last year and being able to go against Nebraska's top defense and kind of adjust to a higher level of competition than what he saw in Montana. So I think I'm eager to see how much he pops up because he's a little bit of a different look compared to everybody else in that wide receiver room as a little bit more of a bigger body guy that can really kind of go up and get 50-50 balls.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but Quinn Clark was one of those guys that when Dana Holgorsen arrived last November, he seemed to have some interest in. It didn't result or, play out with a bunch of snaps and success and all of that, but certainly always a good thing when the offensive coordinator gets to a place and notices you right away.
And he was a guy, I think, I'd have to go back and look, but I think later in the year he was on the travel roster.
And I want to say he was at USC.
Yeah, like whenever you start to see guys pop up on the travel roster late in the season as younger players, that always gets my attention a little bit just because it tends to signal, I mean, it can be a number of things, but it tends to signal that kind of behind the scenes, they're doing things that coaches are noticing and kind of getting themselves a little bit more in the mix to potentially help.
I want to touch on a guy that we didn't get to see much of in the open practice because he had a green jersey on. We didn't get to see in the spring. But you just sort of hear kind of some rumblings about the coaches seem to really like him. Matt Rule brought him up yesterday on Tuesday, talking about him as a culture guy. What do you think the chances are we see some opportunity for Jalen George on Thursday against Cincinnati? A guy who came over from East Tennessee State. And again, it's not like he lit the world on fire at the FCS level, but Nebraska made a point to go out and get him. Like, I think that needs to be part of this discussion, that they saw this guy. They passed on several other defensive linemen that come from the Power 4 ranks. Now we're further down. They weren't, loaded with talent, but loaded with experience. But they chose Jalen George. That should matter, right, Bruntz?
Definitely. And the conversation yesterday is that, he was in the mix for the 11th black shirt with Keona Davis. And like you said, remember, Jalen George was in a green jersey for most of the fall. He didn't participate in the spring, but he was a guy that Nebraska went out, targeted, and got. And I think we're hoping that he could come in and provide immediate impact along that defensive line and give him a little bit of depth. He's added weight. I think he was listed at like 260 whenever he got to Nebraska. He's up around 280, 275, 280 now, I think is what they list him at. But definitely a guy that is going to be in that rotation. It was just a matter of kind of getting him healthy and getting him back up to speed. So knowing all that, I think he's a guy that as the season goes along, I think you could see that role grow even more as he gets more comfortable. The conditioning gets to where it needs to be, and he kind of catches up a little bit from missing so much during the fall. But I think he's absolutely a guy to keep in mind and shouldn't be overlooked just because of where he came from. I think they really like what he can be for this defense.
Yeah, that defensive line just in general is going to be a really interesting thing to watch on Thursday night. Bruntz, we're getting really, really close. And you know what that means? It means everybody needs to check out what we got going on at Husker247.com. We will be back again on game day with another Husker 24/7 Daily. We'll catch you on Thursday.